Welcome back. In this week's episode, we discuss a new Israeli internet censorship law, Israel's fourth coronavirus, and woke Jewish Orthodox teenagers. Joining us today is Josh from Low Effort Zionist Memes. I'm Luke.
And I'm Rody.
And this is the Right Side of the Compass podcast. All right, so today we have a very special guest. Returning from the last time we had him is Josh from Low Effort Zionist Memes. How you doing today, Josh?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Good. Would you like to, for people who don't know who you are, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going by Josh. I'm from Low Effort Zionist Memes. We're a meme page, and we share memes, ideas, news about Israel, Zionism, the Jewish people. You can find us on Instagram. That's where we're mostly active at Low Effort Zionist Memes .3. That's all one word. And feel free to DM us. We're always open.
Awesome. So we're looking forward to having a good chat with you. All right. So if you like our content, please like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to be updated on our latest uploads. In addition, we are on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Audible, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. If you have any questions, the best way to reach us is in the comment section on YouTube, Instagram, and our Facebook page, Right Side of the Compass. All right, so let's not waste any time. Let's get down to the tachlis, as we might say in Hebrew.
Get down to business.
Let's get down to business, as they say. So we got our first topic today, and we've got Israel censors the internet, or not yet, they will censor the internet. So let's discuss what's going on. There's a new proposed Israeli law. It's called the Facebook law, the Facebook bill, and it's designed to censor speech on social media. Now, before we go any further, we have to discuss what type of speech they intend on censoring. So they intend
Not
on
meta,
censoring...
though?
What?
They didn't want to call it the meta bill? Meta law?
Well, you know that politics is always like 20 years behind what's actually going on. You know, I'm surprised they didn't call it the MySpace bill. So Meta's too new, so they use Facebook. But, you know, for them it's pretty impressive because maybe they were going to call it the MySpace bill or the Friendster bill. But the idea is that they want to censor speech on the internet, on social media platforms specifically, that can harm someone, can harm national security, or can harm the state interests. So that's what it says. So that's that. This is not unprecedented in Israeli law, just so everyone's aware. There was a similar law introduced in 2016 that would have done similar things. That bill was killed actually by Benjamin Netanyahu, so I guess good for him. But we're going to get more into the nitty-gritties of why this is a problem. Now, the reason why it was introduced in 2016 is in 2016 at the time there was a big outbreak of Arab violence, and the Israeli authorities determined that there was a lot of incitement to violence on the internet. And so they wanted to combat that in the hopes that if you have all these Arabs, you know, inciting violence against Jewish people and you just cut that off on the internet, then you're going to get less violence. So, and I'm not even against necessarily that line of logic, but let's discuss the ramifications of censorship with no First Amendment, because even in the United States, you do have some degree of censorship, and not all of it is bad, right? Let's be honest. You know, I don't think everyone should be allowed to say anything they want all the time, and even the Supreme Court has agreed that there are certain things you can't do, such as you can't shout fire in a crowded movie theater, can't cause panic, you can't do things like that. But I think the problem with the Israeli law, the Facebook bill specifically, is that unlike in the United States where there's like, it starts from a position of you are allowed to say whatever you want, and then, you know, we kind of limit certain things, but they have to be very specifically stated. There is no First Amendment in Israel, so there's no baseline level of free speech that you have, and then, you know, we kind of curtail it at like the really at the ends of free speech. And what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, no problem. So I think a couple things. I mean, first of all, there are certain realities that Israel faces that the U.S. doesn't face if we're going to be looking at this comparatively. So like the actual, you know, the threats and incitement to violence are very, very serious issues. You don't have to look all the way back to 2016 when the bill was first brought. You can just look at the war we had in last May. And, you know, the buildup to the war, where did it happen? It happened on TikTok of all places. You had Arab youth just sharing and spamming videos of them harassing Jews in the streets of Jerusalem,
I wouldn't call that a
and these
war.
videos
I just
became,
want to clarify that. I wouldn't call it a
what's that?
war. What happened in May, I wouldn't necessarily call it a war. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, the funny thing. So I agree with you, and just the funny thing is, and the difference between Israel and the U.S. is spats like that. I think, as far as I understand, Israelis do call it a war. They face it as a war, and that's the terminology they use. And one, because everyone's packed in such a small space that it really is affecting anyone, and the fact is also like that whole place is
Well, I think
waiting
they
to
would
burn
have
up.
called it an operation. I think. I mean,
Okay,
you
so
can
fine.
call it an
So if
operation.
Yeah, but
operation, yeah.
the thing about that is actually, let's go on a tangent for a second. The idea of calling it an operation and not a war is actually kind of woke political correctness talk. Not even necessarily woke. It's more
You've been
politically correct.
infected. You've been infected. There you go.
No, the idea is that one of the things about political correctness, and I think this was spoken about in Michael Knowles' Speechless. There I go, which is now out on Amazon and it's a bestseller, and you can go buy it now. If I
Just
listen,
mark it for him.
compulsory Michael Knowles plug. Is that it?
I mean, there was just as a fan of Michael Knowles, there was a point where if I would say the word speechless, I would have to do the whole plug because he trained us like Pavlov's dog to just market the book. He's a genius, that guy. So I guess there's still that little bit part of me. But one of the things he notes in that book is that there is this problem of where we don't say the thing anymore. We use these big fancy words that kind of try to hide the reality. So we don't say war, we'll say overseas contingency operation, right? So calling what happened in May an operation instead of a war, it's a difference without a distinction. The only difference is that operation sounds nice, clean, and sanitary. Like you can have an operation where no one dies, but you can't have a war where just like everything's all nice and dandy. So I don't know necessarily if calling it an operation is any more true than calling it a war. I think, in fact, operation obscures what was going on, which is that there was armed conflict between the Israeli Defense Forces and the Hamas operatives. If you don't want to call it a war because it's not between two armies that are following the law, then maybe. But I never considered
Yeah, I
that
don't
to be
consider it a
this.
war because I don't think it was really big. No troops were sent in, nothing like that. But
Okay, so then
that's
that's a different thing.
Whatever, that's a discussion for another time. But going back, what Josh you were saying about
Yeah.
the conflict in social media.
Yeah, no. I was just saying like what the last war demonstrated to us, and again, this is a lesson we also learned in 2016, but it just happens every time. Is that incitement to violence is a real thing, and it is especially real on social media with regard to the Arab youth in Israel, and it really galvanizes people to come out and do violence, beat people up in the street, stabbings, the litany of terroristic activities that we see. And so my only reason for bringing that up is uh, this discussion of censorship on the internet is not happening in a vacuum. There seems to me there is a problem. It's unprecedented because we don't know how to deal with the tools of the internet and social media appropriately. It's all very new technology, relatively, and we're all just kind of mucking around. But certainly, I think that and I think you'll get into this, Rhodey or Luke. The language of the bill is too general, and when we generalize that far, we're handing over certain powers that we might not want to hand over to the government, any government, really.
Right. That's kind of my big issue with the bill, because it's not in the concept, right? Because I can entertain media censorship, social media censorship, if, for example, we want to go and shut down a lot of these like woke gender theorists on the internet that are preying on children. I'm totally okay with that. If you want to shut down like transgenderism on the internet, like by all means, let's do it. But the issue is that because it's so broad, right? Then and this is going to have to do with the next topic as well. Well, what's stopping the Israeli government from saying, oh well, if you're anti-vaccine mandate, you are getting in the way of national security because you're convincing people not to get the vaccine, and then they'll shut you down, right?
Yeah, the point is to be broad for that exact reason. Because if you're broad, then there's room to add things to it later on. It's like, oh well, this wasn't specified, so we can censor you because of this, because we didn't specify on what we can censor
Right.
specifically. And in addition to that, where it's very difficult nowadays to really gauge what to really censor or not because, like you said, there's a fine line between, like, freedom of speech and not freedom of speech. Like, we never when the idea of freedom of speech, when it was, at least in America, when it was first created, and I'm not even talking about the law, I'm talking about the idea because unlike America, Israel doesn't have rights, it has privileges. So the concept of freedom of speech was made in a time where you didn't have a mass um, a portal or a little device called a computer where you can get all the information and anyone can post their opinion. It would take a few days for people to write an article, then put it in the newspaper, then bring it out. It wasn't, not everyone's opinion was out there. So, it was much easier to say, yeah, freedom of speech, but in an age where there's so much, opinion and so much misinformation, and you don't know what's right, what's wrong, people's different, uh, people has different, agendas, even like, news, not news. So it's hard to gauge kind of what the right move is. But at the same time, like you said, you are right. You don't want to, I think it would be better if it was specific because if it wasn't specific, then you don't want to give that kind of power to the government. And especially in the Israeli government, which is known to be authoritarian, you can actually see them doing it, unlike in the US where it's less authoritarian.
Well, you know that in Israel we already have laws against certain types of speech on the internet. So, for example, it mirrors more the idea of lashon hara, which means literally bad speech. But the idea is that you're not supposed to badmouth people for no reason, right? And so, how it comes out in the actual laws is as follows. Let's say I eat at a restaurant, right? And I had a terrible time eating at the restaurant. So I go on the internet, I go on Yelp, and I say, this restaurant, Israel food is a terrible restaurant. They botched up the food. The staff was terrible, etc. You can get fined for that because you're speaking badly about an institution. Now, I would make the argument and say, hold on a minute. If I'm on a forum for people asking for a recommendation and I say this restaurant's not a good restaurant and I say why it's not a good restaurant, I'm not really saying lashon hara. I'm telling people to save their money and not go to that restaurant because it's bad service. And I think that's very useful to people. But at the same time, that's the type of censorship that goes on in Israel.
Well, maybe it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. I think that's more like if you're saying, hey, like they had bad service. Well, if you're saying like, oh, they have terrible service, like, fuck them, and they're gonna like, kill someone one day, or you can, change it saying like, oh, well, I didn't appreciate their services. I thought it wasn't good, and what they gave you, what you paid for wasn't worth no, what they gave you wasn't worth the money that I paid for it. I don't
Right.
know, it's about the wording. I don't think it's about what you're saying.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look more into it, but I know this is very pertinent when you go to these Israeli food groups on Facebook and you're talking about restaurants. And then if someone says something bad about a restaurant, someone in the comments will go, be very careful what you're saying because you can get in trouble for this if they find out. Right. If they
Oh,
lose
really?
money because you're saying this, you can get sued. Um, but I think, and if we want to look at laws that are more relevant to this type of law, just go to England. If you've been paying attention to what goes on in the UK, you'll know, for example, that the police, instead of dealing with crimes such as these grooming gangs, they'll go and they'll scour the internet for quote unquote hate speech. So if you want to know what Israel will look like if this bill passes, just look to England and you'll see exactly what it looks like.
That's an interesting comparison. I'll say this. I'll say this. I think that first of all, again, it's good that it was brought up that Israel's sort of approach is more about privileges rather than rights. It's more European rather than it is American. And I think that especially in the American context, our rights are not divorced from responsibilities. And I think that's really how the founding fathers meant it. So yes, we have free speech, and it's largely freer than any other place in the world. But with a right like that, there does come a responsibility to make sure you're using your speech, well, and not just in the sense within the bounds of law, but within, I would say, socially accepted, not good or bad, but like use it well, use it with
Like you
purpose, use
can't
it with
yell fire in a
conviction.
movie theater.
Right. And
Right, and but I'm not. But again, like I'm not against any of what you're saying. My concern is that I'm afraid this is going to go the other way, where if you point out something if you say something that's not helpful to the government, they'll just say, "Oh, this is against national security. We're gonna censor this speech." So if even ignoring the vaccines, if you say something that like the two-state solution is essentially like ever since Oslo, if you said one state solution in Israel, unless you're like in a little village somewhere where no one can see you, you're considered a hack or this, that. But imagine if now on the internet you can't even say, hey, Oslo doesn't work, because that gets in the way of national security to say that Oslo is not a good idea. That's just an example, right? So, even if you're ignoring the coronavirus, right? If you want to say that Oslo doesn't work, right? The government theoretically could go on Facebook and say, "Oh, that gets in the way of national security," and you can't say that.
yeah, but I think there's a fine line. I think there's a fine line. Like the difference between saying I don't agree with Oslo or saying even going to say that Oslo is the end of Israel, right? There's a difference between saying that and what I think this bill should actually target, which is literal incitements to violence. And I think they do make a good point in the sense, like I think in the article that you shared, there was an example brought up about a Bedouin woman whose photo was shared to social media without her hijab on, and so her father could be incensed to violence if he sees her without her hijab, right? And within 3 days, that's too long to wait a time before something violent happens. Okay, so that's a good point. So something is shared to TikTok, and within hours, streets are flooded.
Of course, of
Um,
course. But like just to clarify what you meant by 3 days. So essentially right now under this law, there would be like a committee. And if you want something taken off the internet, you have to go to the committee and they take several days to do it. But there was changes to the law suggested by, I believe it's the Israel Democracy Institute, where they said that the law should be much more specific and things that need to be taken off the internet should be done within 3 hours, like snap decision. That I think would be a much better way to do it, because I agree with you that there are while I disagree, like I think that if, let's say, a Muslim father goes and beats or kills his daughter because she was seen without the hijab, I think he should be like have the book thrown at him and be, I don't know, what's the cruelest form of punishment I can imagine. I don't even know. But at the same time, like yeah, I agree that we'd rather not have that. And I think part of
no,
it would
so I'm
be to
saying, right, all I'm saying is that there's a difference between criticizing and even sharply criticizing the Oslo process versus literal calls to violence, posting videos of yourself spitting on Jews, beating them up, and I think the law should reflect that difference.
Of course, I agree, but my issue is that the law doesn't state that, and I'm afraid
Right,
that the
right.
people in charge are not sophisticated enough to get that, because as we can see,
I hear
the
you.
Israeli politicians are not very sophisticated. But let's just talk about one more issue, and then we'll go on to the next topic. This is a bill advanced by a member of Knesset named Gidon Sar. It's very important for people to know who this guy is. Gidon Sar was actually, until very recently, the number two in the Likud party, which is Benjamin Netanyahu's party. In the last election, he broke off to make his own party. I believe it's called the New Hope Party, so Star Wars. But he actually joined the new coalition with Bennett and the left and the Arabs. He joined them so he could be part of the government, and he's putting this bill through. So just so you understand who Gidon Sar is and why it has a better chance to pass this time. Last time it didn't pass because Benjamin Netanyahu just killed the bill, which I think the prime minister just has the ability to do for some reason. But this time we don't see that. So unless there's some really principled person over there that's not going to vote for this, you might begin to see the Israeli police have a speech division in there, scouring the internet for things that people aren't allowed to say, which to me is very scary because the Israeli police is already not very freedom oriented. They're not restricted by anything, and so giving them the power over the internet, not my idea of a good time. But we'll see. I don't know. What do you guys think?
So like you going back to what you guys mentioned before, I agree. You said how there's a committee and then it will take a few days. It's fine because like what's kind of the point? Because like once it's out there, like it's less than a few days to go viral. So like people will beat you to the streets in like a few hours. So like you said, they want to change it to a few hours. So I do, agree in that sense that there's kind of no point if it takes a few days. But also I agree with you, Luke, in addition that the problem with the bill is that it is too general. And when you make things too general, what's very dangerous about this is, yeah, it is meant for good, to stop people from inciting violence, but then what's stopping them from, potentially, I'm not saying they will do, but potentially, shutting speech down for other things.
Right, which is why I don't think it's very useful in this regard to kind of censor speech. I think in certain instances, speech censorship might be very useful and even just and correct. But I think if you have a whole sector of society that's interested in doing this kind of thing, I think what's more useful is expanding gun rights and allowing Israelis to defend themselves rather than try to police the entire speech of a fifth of your population. Not justifying Arab speech at all. Like sometimes Arabs say like the most horrendous things I've ever seen. And I think part of it would be if we would curtail some religious rights and say, for example, oh, you can't wear the niqab, right? Because I think for example, when it comes to the niqab, the people who are forced to wear the niqab typically aren't doing it of free will. They're typically forced to by very conservative political forces. Um, and in general kind of like restricting Islam more, because it seems to be that no one wants to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Islam. But if a fifth of your population is interested in inciting violence, then you need to arm the four-fifths of the population that are the victims of that violence. But no one's gonna listen to me because I'm just a guy on the internet, so
Aren't we all? Yeah, aren't we all at this point?
we're all just people on the internet. Welcome to the new
Yeah, that's
age,
it.
That's what we all are. Anyways, but speaking of saying things that are not politically correct or not politically, they're damaging to national security, let's talk about the fourth coronavirus vaccine that Israel just approved of doing. So let's talk about the facts first. Israel for a while has been talking about the fourth vaccine. The old meme that says, "Oh, on the seventh vaccine, I took the seventh vaccine, but I'm against the 13th shot." That is going to
Yeah,
be Israel.
and your eye is twitching.
Yeah, no. My favorite COVID, like the COVID shot meme, was you see like the left is trying to take back the narrative. So you see like this Giga Chad guy and he just has like all the logos of all the vaccines, and you see he's just like shooting himself up with the vaccine. It's like, yeah, I got all the vaccines, bro. Yeah, I'm a Giga Chad. I got all the vaccines. So that was one of my favorite things. Israel really is becoming the meme of 17 shots. But the point is they've now approved the fourth shot. So they said initially that the fourth shot's going to be for the people who are immunocompromised. As far as agreement on the fourth vaccine, it has passed in the sense that the bureaucracy has said they approved the fourth vaccine. But there are a lot more Israeli scientists saying that it's not a good idea to get the fourth vaccine necessarily because it might cause an immune system fatigue, which will cause the vaccine to be less effective. So what they're saying essentially is that if you keep on getting the same vaccine over and over again, it will actually be bad for you, because unlike the first three shots, which are all different, allegedly the third and the fourth shot are just the same shot. It's just the same shot. So there are some Israeli scientists who are saying, "Hey, is this a good idea?" And that's the background. So those are the facts you need to know for all of this.
I mean, in addition, the the difference between, like, for example, I don't, these aren't the same. Are these the exact same shots in terms of, like, is it for a different variant or is it for the same variant? Because I also feel like there's no point of it because you mentioned it a lot, is it's usually for the last variant. So like, will the fourth vaccine even help because it's not even for the Omicron, unless it is. But
No, it's not. It's the same shot as the third one. And from what I understand, the third shot came out at around the Delta time, which is to say that unless the people who make the vaccines are incredibly knowledgeable in how the virus rather is going to mutate, even the third shot wasn't necessarily for Delta. It was just a booster shot, right? So in my opinion, or at least the way I see it, what's going on is you have these people just coming up with vaccines, hoping that just throwing something at the wall, hopefully it will stick. And we're going to see that, it may not necessarily stick. Already we see that, we were told initially that if you get the vaccine, you're not going to be able to get anyone sick. That's not true. We've seen that if you get the vaccine, they told us rather that if you get the vaccine, you can't get sick. Also not true. Allegedly what the vaccine's supposed to do, and I'm not even saying this necessarily to say it's not true, but rather just to say that what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to mitigate the worst symptoms of the virus, which fair enough. I'm not going to argue that point because I think that I agree with that, I think, at least from the data that I've seen. But if you get the vaccine, and even if you get the third shot, and now especially because we're hearing from scientists that the Omicron is kind of just like the cold. So I have to wonder what is the point of all this? Like, who cares if I get the fourth vaccine? Like, it shouldn't matter to anyone.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think I was gonna mention what you said, and it's just like the whole point of the vaccines is it's not going to stop the spread. That's the sort of meme. Let's go. Let's stop the spread. Let's lock down. 15 days to stop the spread.
Longest 15 days of my life. It's been 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. So the point of the vaccine is we're not going to stop the spread, and this is something that's Israeli researchers are sort of finally coming around to this. It's been something that's already well understood in the U.S. through Jay Bhattacharya. He's from Stanford University, and it was certainly, I think, known. Who knew it the best? The Swiss from the beginning understood this concept well. You're not going to stop the spread. All you can do is mitigate symptoms, and we're doing it pretty well. We're doing it really, really very well.
All things considered. All things considered.
Hospitalizations are nowhere near the levels they used to be. And
by the way, just to remind people, wasn't the point of the lockdowns not even to save lives, but just to make sure that the hospital systems weren't overwhelmed? Wasn't that the entire point? So if we're not even getting that sick, right, then who cares how many people get sick? Like, it shouldn't matter.
I don't know, but I mean, I don't know. The math does add up. Doesn't 15 days equal 2 years? I don't know.
Maybe like woke math. Maybe like in the same like universe where 2 + 2 = 5, 15 days equals 2 years. Who knows?
Right.
Yeah, we're just how many hours?
You need to account for the implicit racism in mathematics, and that's how you stretch.
You know what it is? Bidenflation. The value of 15 days has gone up to 2 years. You can get more. You could get more hours with 15 days under Bidenflation.
It's not even that. It's like you wanted to order an oven. It's not going to come here in 15 days. It's going to take 2 years.
Okay. So we spoke about the dangers of over-vaccination, at least according to some Israeli scientists. But let's talk about Gadi Yvarkon again. I think he's become my favorite politician. He's in the Likud party, in case no one heard, that before on the show. And he's becoming the only politician I think I won't banish to St. Helena when this is all over. When I've become the supreme dictator of Israel and I sentence all the politicians who were responsible for all of this to death by trial or whatever, he's going to get like a seat next to me where he can watch and be very comfortable because he's the only one that's talking some sense at the Knesset level as far as I've seen. And I don't know how good your Hebrew is, Josh, but my Hebrew...
I'm fluent.
Oh, you're fluent. Okay, so you watched the video.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I would play the video, but it's in Hebrew, so it's kind of like, what's the point? But basically, tell me if I'm correct. And the idea was that he wasn't talking about from a freedom perspective, like it's always wrong to shut down, malls or whatever. He was saying more that this vaccine doesn't do what, people want it to do. And based on the symptoms of the virus, the rates of infection and serious hospitalization and obviously death, the measures we're taking against COVID are not proportional to what this would call for, which is to say maybe kind of isolate the more vulnerable and then allow everyone to go back to living. As someone who is a history major, I know a lot of people who took history classes so that they could go into tourism. And when I came back to Israel, everyone I know who was in tourism is not in tourism anymore because there's no tourism industry. because of COVID. And so I look at it and go, well, you just shut down most of the Israeli economy, because most of the Israeli economy is people coming, doing tourism, buying stuff, bringing money into the Israeli economy. And then you have a big industry of, oh, that rock over there was a big argument over there over whose God was mightier at that rock. And so now we have a Jewish holiday that commemorates that called so but that's a lot of Israeli tourism. So, now that we've destroyed tourism with coronavirus, I have to wonder if this is in any way proportional to, the virus at hand. And,
Well, what Gotti was doing is, in my estimation, was a pretty simple cost benefit analysis, right? And it's something that, again, it's I'm a stan of Jay Bhattacharya at Stanford. It's something he's been saying for a long time. It's like, okay, so these vaccines, they're not stopping the spread. They weren't designed to stop the spread. We're locking people down, and these lockdowns are just having like these insane deleterious effects that no one's really talking about. Depression, suicide rates are up. That was the number 2 killer in the United States, I think, right behind fentanyl overdosing. We're talking about early childhood development being completely tanked, and certainly tourism in Israel. I mean, like it's such a major industry because it's the center point for so many people of various religious backgrounds. And
well, I mean,
think
just to cut you off for a second, I mean, think about all the kids that kind of grew up with the 2 years of COVID, and now they think it's normal that everyone wears a mask and you can't see anyone's facial expressions anymore. That's bound to have some negative impacts on people. I'm sure there's going to be some sociopaths who just can't read faces anymore.
2 years is a long time especially for a kid.
Yeah, there are 2-year-olds who grew up because, you don't really remember anything from like the first 2-3 years of your life. So imagine like now they're 4 or 5 and they're just starting to become cognizant of what's going on around them. They think that it's normal to walk around with masks. Like, that's crazy. Like, who I don't know. It's just there's a part of me that's just like, if only for the like. I know it's such a like cliche. Will anyone think about the children? But now it's like normal to like cover our children's faces with masks all the time and just shoot them up with a vaccine for a virus that they're not going to get because it doesn't affect children, at least not to the same degree that it affects older people. And so I look at that,
right? And I think the funny thing is like the sort of meme of Israel is that it's this super scientific high tech state, right? We're sort of we're exporting our science to the rest of the world, and yet Gotti's bringing up a very very sound basic argument, and for one reason or another, this worldview this won't be accepted.
Yeah.
You can look at the numbers, you can look at the effects it's having, and this is all very public knowledge. People in Israel losing their businesses left and right. The stipends that they got from the government was pennies to the dollar, or agorot to the shkelim. It was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, unlike in the United States where they can afford to print money because the whole like oil industry is based on the petrodollar, the Israelis just can't print money if they don't want hyperinflation. Like, even like you're seeing this in the most powerful country in the world where just they're printing money and they're shooting themselves in the foot. I remember before coronavirus, if like my parents sent me $100, for whatever it is, it would get like 3.8 shekels to the dollar. Now it's almost 3 shekels to the dollar. Like, it's crazy. Like the level of inflation. The dollar is ruined, and Israel can't even afford to do that. So if like, let's say you get unemployed because they shut down the economy, that's it. You're not getting anything from Bituach Leumi, which is it's Israeli Social Security. But the thing you need to understand about Israeli Social Security is, unlike American Social Security, where you only pay if you're working, Israeli Social Security, you owe them $60 every month. Even if you live in a box in the middle of the road, you owe them $60 a month, which is like approximately 200 something shekel.
No wonder people are still homeless.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you live in a box and you have to pay Arnona on that. That drives me bananas. But I think
property tax on my box. What?
No, I'm gonna have to downsize to like an Amazon parcel because I can't afford the taxes on this refrigerator box. But I think Gadi Avarkan's strategy, I think it may not tug at the heartstrings in the same way that like a passionate, argument from Liberty would. But I think that's the argument you need to make when you're talking about.
It's a practical argument. It's a practical one.
Right, because I think in the grand scheme of things, I think everyone would agree that if the Black Plague were to come back, right? I think everyone would agree to stay home. If like 33% of the population were dying, I think everyone would agree. Like, okay, maybe like I'll stay indoors, like even if it affects my children, because I don't want them like developing black spots and just like dying, you know. But COVID is just not that. It's a lot of old people are getting sick and then they're dying because as old people are wont to do, and then you got a lot of people who lose their sense of taste for a bit, and then you go back to life. And I think a lot of people are saying like, hey, listen, I got COVID and it was unfortunate, but I lived through it, and I kind of just want to see my friends now, and I kind of want to go to the mall, and I don't want to have to papers please all the time. um, that's what I think is going to work over time. Especially, I was talking to one of my neighbors, and he got the first two vaccines. This is an older man already, older gentleman, and he got the first two shots, and he didn't even get the third shot, right? So imagine, as more people develop that attitude where it's like, okay, how many shots do I need to take now, right? There's always going to be like that section of the population where no matter how many shots you tell them to take, they'll take it, right? But I think a lot of Israelis are more discerning than that. And I think as you ask them to take more vaccines, they're going to start saying no. Eventually, everything's going to have to open up because you can't run an economy if only 10% of the people are getting the vaccines necessary to participate in it. So you're going to see a lot of malls are going to say, hey, I don't know about the rules, whatever, but I can't afford to run on 10% of the population. So I'm just going to open up anyways, and the rules be damned. I don't know.
Now it's not even shutting down. Now it's the step further. It's like, we're not going to shut down now, but now everyone needs to get the vaccine and stuff, which might not even work.
Well, I don't think everyone getting the vaccine is going to work in Israel, because you already you still have a lot, like I remember when Naftali Bennett was talking about the percentages of the people who got the vaccine. I think it was like 60 something percent. Now it's like only 50% of people are fully vaccinated, right?
Is that because did they change the definition of what it means to be fully vaccinated?
Yeah,
Or?
that's because you have a bunch of people who got the first two vaccines, and you got a bunch of people who only got the first one. By the way, they got the first vaccine, they got the second vaccine, that was fully vaccinated for a while, and then the third shot. But the third shot didn't happen until after he made the speech. So in between that time, there are less people who were down to get the third shot. So then you have to wonder, okay, how many people get the third shot? And now they're going to hear the thing where the fourth shot is really the same as the third shot. And so you'll be like, yeah, I don't really want to get that thing. And then there's going to be people who are like, okay, I'm done with the fourth shot. I'm not getting the fifth shot now. And as more people say, like, I'm not getting the 27th shot, the Israeli government will have to open up at some point, because you can't, if Israelis are not cooperating with it, what are you going to do? Go to every door and put a gun to their head and say, get vaccinated or else? That's a really nice social life you got there. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we laugh about it now.
well,
next thing you know, someone's come knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Like now.
אחי, התחסנת עם החיסון השביעי? אחי, נו, מה, אתה לא יודע? אתה תקבל את הווריאנט לא יודע. But I actually, and this is a big announcement, so I'm probably going to get the vaccine. And but I already put.
Do we say Mazel Tov or
no? You say Baruch Dayana Emet. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, nah. I listen. The truth is that I look at the situation and I go, okay, well, I want to be free, but on the other hand, I want to continue living in Israel, and so I decided, okay, so I'm going to give it one more shot, and the shot is as follows: I'm going to get the vaccine. I'm going to live like a normal human, for however long it is. And then I'm going to see what's going on when my rent is up. And if I think it's going to change, I'm going to stay in Israel. And if not, I'm going to have to pack my bags and go, not home, but to the United States, because I don't want to get 27 shots to live in Israel. Like, to me, it's not worth it, and I don't think that's a fair thing to ask of me. But we'll see. I don't know. Hopefully it will change. Hopefully I can continue living here. If not, the show will be, done in Florida. Well, the land of the free, home of the brave. Whatever.
What's their saying? Do they have a quote?
Florida man. Florida man does X.
Florida man does X.
Yes, that is the national saying of Florida. Florida man does X. This show is going to be, you're going to start calling me Florida man, and you'll be like, Florida man talks politics. Florida man says ABC. Absolutely based. All right, so hopefully this topic is you guys are gonna have a little more to add. Not that you guys didn't have what to add beforehand, but I think that this is a topic that is very cultural, and because we're all in that circle, I think we can all kind of talk about it with a certain level of authority. Let's talk about woke orthodoxy. Before you have ultra orthodox, and you have modern orthodox, and now you have woke orthodox. So let's talk about it. What does it mean to be woke? All right. So, Josh, do you want to go over that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think woke has been a term that's existed for quite a while. I mean, I think like the origin of the term was, if I'm not wrong, it was started by the left. You're just sort of awake to the inequities and the ever-present racism that exists in every single facet of our societies, and you're actively looking to uncover that racism wherever. And it's not wherever; it definitely exists. You're just looking to uncover the racism.
That's the idea. Essentially, that it exists. You just need to find it.
Right. And so woke is.
So they just replace the A with the O.
Yeah. You're taking on this this stupid responsibility of finding and or inputting racism and whatever other discriminatory word you want to throw in there in every single facet of life.
Right. So we covered the first part, which James Lindsay very puts it very well in his book Cynical Theories, which I think is a very important thing to note. The difference between fighting racism and being woke is that when you're fighting racism, you'll see something that maybe is racist and you'll point it out, right? So if you see an interaction between two people and you're just looking for racism, you might find racism, you might not find racism. But if you're woke, the assumption is that it is racist, and now you just need to parse and find out how it's racist. What also is a key function of being woke is that there's oppression Olympics, right? It's a kind of this generic, it's this kind of like overused term, but it's overused because it talks about a very real phenomenon, which is that you could be a white man, but if you're a black man, you're more oppressed than the white man. And if you're a black gay man, you're more oppressed than the black man. And if you're a gay woman, then you're more oppressed than the black gay man. And so on and so forth, until you're literally just a guy in a wheelchair who's the wrong skin color, and everything's just wrong with you. You're just more marginalized because of all these things. And there's a hierarchy, right? So, and what that means in practicality is that if you're a white man, you automatically in your interactions, you are racist against a black man, but a black man is oppressive towards a black woman, right? That's an important part of wokeness. So
yeah,
right.
That's an important part of wokeness. I guess if you had to boil down wokeness to like a single definition, it would be the view of society that is looked at through the lenses of critical cultural Marxism, right? So it's not just your regular Marxist who's looking, to redistribute the means of production. It's more about how you look at society and the way different groups interact with each other, and you're looking through a kind of Marxist interpretation. So that's what it really means to be woke. And so now that we understand that, right, why does wokeness directly conflict with Orthodox belief and practice? This is a very important question because there are people who have tried to introduce wokeness into the Orthodox lexicon. Orthodox Judaism specifically. I know that we probably have someone who's like, oh, he's speaking about Orthodox Christianity, but no, we're not. We're talking about Orthodox Judaism. And we're going to just use the term Orthodox as a catch-all for very traditional Judaism. I know there's like, people don't like the word Orthodox sometimes, but we're just going to use it as a catch-all and people will have to understand. But the thing about wokeness is that it's predicated also on this belief of postmodernism, that you can't know things for a fact, that everything is about subjective experiences. But Orthodox Judaism was actually, or Judaism more broadly, was the first religion in the world to make substantive, objective, quote unquote, claims about the universe, that there's one God and his name is ineffable, but he's one God, and he made rules and you have to follow them, and it's based on reality. Right? There's no subjectivity. It's not polytheistic where you can believe in different gods and everyone has the God that they respect and you all just tolerate each other. It's very intolerant in that way, and it sets a standard. But the thing about postmodernism is that it doesn't set a standard. It's the opposite, right? It sets an anti-standard. The only standard is that you can't have a standard, right? So that's
right, 100%. And then the other thing I would attach onto it is it's actually like woke and the people who are of this persuasion, because it's already an a priori accepted truth that everyone and everything is racist. There is no concept of redemption, meaning you are eternally stained. And I think Judaism very much comes hard against this claim. There's it's a thought that I had that it is actually somewhat the sort of the Christian character of the U.S., which has allowed an ideology like this to spread so quickly, and it's because of this concept of the eternality of sin, the fundamental eternal concept of sin, that man is
original
forever
sin, like where Adam,
original sin, right?
right, where Adam eats from the tree of knowledge between good and evil. That was the original sin, and then humanity is forever tainted by that.
Right, and so like I can see, I like, this is my own personal. I see some parallels, which not that they're the same, of course, but it's why it's allowed the meme of woke to spread so quickly, and Judaism just doesn't have that. You know,
So I would actually disagree. I think in terms of, you make a good point that it's very similar in to Christianity in form almost. I view, because it's very important to understand that America is a Christian nation, right? So any movement that's designed to take down the United States, that's designed to be this anti-American movement, has to be anti-Christian. And so
no, right. I want to clarify. I'm not saying that. First of all, I disagree that America is a Christian nation. I think we can have an interesting back and forth on that. But my point is to say that woke is for sure anti-Christian, in its theological beliefs. And those people are of two opposite ideological interests. But I'm just saying, just like how wokeness co-ops Marxist analysis for viewing racism and gender and all this stuff, it so also plays on the Christian conception of sin.
right, because okay, so I was reading up on the cult of Baal, as you do when you have nothing else to do. You look
As one does, as one does.
As one does, and I've come to the conclusion that more so than any other like belief system or anything else, the cult of Baal is anti-Judaism. Is like the anti-Judaism, not anti-Judaism in the sense that it's against
Wait,
Judaism.
what's the cult of Baal?
Baal,
Yeah.
Baal, the rain god, the Canaanite god of fertility. The one,
Okay.
the one where Elijah.
You didn't know about that? You didn't know about that, Rhodey?
Come
You didn't
on,
know about the
man!
rain
It's
god?
in the Bible. Elijah slaughtered 400 of their prophets.
Oh man.
Absolutely based. Anyways, so I've come to the conclusion that the cult of Baal is the anti-Judaism. That it's like, if you wanted to create like an evil doppelganger of Judaism, that's the exact like opposite of Judaism, it would be the cult of Baal. So similarly, the cult of woke is the anti-Christianity, because it was formed in opposition to Christianity in America more broadly in the West. And the West was formed by Christianity, which, is related to Judaism, but it's not exactly the same, right? And I think we can all agree on that, regardless of your opinions on Christianity. Christianity is related to Judaism, but it's also related to Greek philosophy, and then it has its own stuff in there as well. But the cult of wokeness is an anti-Christianity, and as a result, you're very astute to point out that it mirrors the concept of the quote-unquote original sin. In Christianity, you have the original sin of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and in wokeism, you have the sin of being born a white person. But unlike in
Oh, because we're talking about racism specifically.
Yeah. So, and then there's also like, you're a man, so you're a misogynist, you're not like, you need to be feminist, you can't be a misogynist. And then there's like anti-homosexuality, homophobia, transphobia, all the buzzwords. But essentially the sin is that you're born into a group with privilege, privilege being the word for sin here. And, but unlike in Christianity, where there is a path forward, even in wokeism, you can adopt those belief systems. You can say, oh, I'm a white man and I agree that XYZ group is discriminated against, but there's no path to redemption for you. So that's very important to understand. Like, I'm not a Christian, and I can't tell Christians to be Christian, because I'm not really interested in doing that. What I will say is that if I had to choose between living under a dictatorship run by the cult of Jesus or a dictatorship run by the cult of woke, I'll pick the Jesus guys any day. Like, they're at least based
I
in
mean,
reality.
we already did go through that, and it's called the Crusades, and they would torture and kill us. So
Oh, I agree. I recognize that. But the Catholics, by the way, were not even the worst offenders of the Christians. The worst offenders in terms of anti Semitism were the Eastern Orthodox. And I know this because I've done some, cursory readings, and it turns out that pretty much every interaction with
as you do on your free time.
yeah, well, listen, I'm a man who enjoys history. It turns out that a lot of the smears against Catholicism regarding anti-Semitism, they're very overblown. Granted, there were anti-Semitic Catholics. I'm not saying that wasn't the case, but a lot of the popes were actually pretty pro-Jewish, and they did protect their Jewish subjects. In the First Crusade, I think it was, I forget which Pope Innocent said this, but the Pope Innocent at the time said, like, hey, you're going to conquer the promised land for the Muslims. Don't attack the Jews. They did it anyways, but the Catholics were not as bad as we like to paint them in the woke world. The Eastern Orthodox were the worst offenders. They sent the Cossacks. There was pretty much, I can't think of a single interaction between the Eastern Orthodox churches more broadly, and Judaism that were positive in any way. But even them, I'd still rather live in a world where I can be assaulted by Cossacks than be assaulted in a world run by the woke. Like, just as a personal, and I say this as a person whose family, like half my family comes from the Soviet Union, so we know all about Cossacks, so.
Right. I was just about to say. It's not like we don't know how woke plays out in real life. I mean, we you can look at. I can tell you that some of the other mods for Lesm, actually, I think all of them except for one family comes from the former Soviet Union. They're FSU Jews, and I mean the plague that communism played on their lives. It wasn't just like Nazism, which was sort of very much about just physically destroying us. I mean, the effects of communism had multi-generational effects on Jews, whereas not only did they kill a bunch of Jews, but like they diminished their spirit down to its smallest grain. I mean, you have generations and generations of Jews who couldn't fathom being religious, and it's all because of this ideology, which was just like force fed into the throats of hundreds of thousands of Jews. And woke it will function like that without a doubt.
Exactly.
It's this. Yeah.
Exactly. You're going to see a lot of these Jewish kids, they're going to grow up with these two conflicting ideologies, woke and Orthodox, and they're going to have to make a choice. Now,
well, it's not even. I'm sorry. It's the funny thing is I don't even think it'll be presented as a choice. What's going to happen is it's going to present itself as a form of Judaism, and it's something we see, right? Like Tikkun Olamism, right? I mean, that I think is an insert of wokeism, which is coming to say, no, I'm actually Jewish, and you should like. It's sort of like how early Christianity came to the Jews. They still come to the Jews this way. We are actually Judaism. You should join our band.
Right, but right, so that's actually like parallels in that way early Christianity, because early Christians actually many times they would go to synagogues with the Pharisees, right? It wasn't until much later that they did their own thing. But early Christians, the earliest of them, they would go to synagogue with the Pharisees and they would do Pharisee things, and they just believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and that's how they kind of did that. And that's that. But what you really want to get into is that these guys are making this parallel religion where we're saying, like, how many Jews do you know that make the arguments like, well, when the Bible says it's anti-homosexuality, what it really is, it's not really anti-gay marriage. It's really this. It's really that. You don't understand. Your stupid lizard brain thinks that when it says man should not sleep with a man, it's an abomination. It really means that man should sleep with another man. You're just too stupid to understand
they
it.
bring up the argument of David and
oh God, I hate this one, Jonathan. Yeah,
and Jonathan. Yeah,
yeah, but that's just because the truth is they just don't understand bromance. Because
they can't understand that you can love another guy and just not be gay.
Have they never heard of a mandate where a man takes another man out on a date and it's heterosexual like that? There is a concept called a mandate,
brunch,
and
specifically.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's nothing wrong with bromance. Like I think women took over the concept of
We should promote mandates and not mandates.
Exactly. I love mandates.
There you go.
Exactly.
Good one.
All
But
right, so there you
especially
go.
nowadays, you have this concept where like only women can be like intimate with each other without being sexual. Like, have you ever seen like girls' pictures where they're all kind of like scrunched up together and they're all like you're giving each other kisses and they're so close to each other that you're afraid they're going to merge into one large fat woman, right? And for men, it's just like, get away from me, bro. I don't want other people thinking I'm gay, you know?
But going back to what you were saying, you're saying that woke is attacking the culture and ideology, and you think that's more dangerous than attacking the physical like people. And this is something I want to bring up because when I was younger, a teacher of mine, he brought this up. He says that the enemies don't realize this, and I can't believe I'm giving my enemies advice right now, but the best way to get rid of Jews is by leaving them alone. Okay? Because if you leave them alone, they will assimilate, or they will, I don't know, get influenced by wokeism, as you guys are saying, and he says that it's kind of good that these things happen to us because, every time something bad has happened to the Jewish people, it's always been times where like Jews have like are on the cusp of like assimilating fully and like not being Jewish anymore. And that kind of brings us back to Judaism.
Right. I believe it's a I think it was Sun Tzu that said this in, I think it was the art of, what is this book called? The Art of War?
Indeed.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's the Art of War. The Art of War.
Yeah, the Art of War. I believe he says this. Correct me if I'm wrong. He says, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And that's kind of like what, Rhodey said. Like, if you want to get rid of the Jews, just let them make mistakes.
But it's true.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. There was a covenant with Abraham where God said he's going to take care of us. But if we're bad, he's going to take care of us, he's going to take, yeah, that's the thing. But let's discuss, besides for the gay marriage thing, let's talk about other aspects of wokeism that have gone into the Orthodox world, because I think, in my opinion, we have strayed a bit too far in the discussion from strictly wokeism. So I want to refocus the discussion. So let's talk about, some of the things we see in Orthodoxy. So for example, I see a lot of Orthodox Jews not being very strict on, kind of towing the line when it comes to conversions. I don't want to say they respect it, but I think you'll have a lot of people that will include, let's say, Reform conversion Jews in the broader Jewish society, whereas we should really be towing the line and saying like, hey, this is unacceptable that they're converting this way, right? You got a lot of people like that. You got a lot of people, of course, that are banging on about the different social issues. Of course, communism is a big one. A lot of Orthodox teenagers don't know how bad communism is. I saw this even in high school. Like, it wasn't even necessarily called woke back, long ago when I was in high school, but you had a lot of people who were pro gay marriage, which is against Orthodox belief and practice. You've got a bunch of people who are for more liberal social policies, much more critical of Israel in terms of its handling of the conflict. And then, of course, you have guys like Rav Shigar, who literally introduced postmodernism into Jewish thought, right? And then you've got guys like Yehuda Cohen, Rudy Rockman, who are using woke, just to bring this all back, because the rule is that when we have LEZM on, we have to somehow bash Rudy Rockman and Yehuda Cohen and their ilk. We have to bash them.
It shouldn't be a concrete rule, but I think we always somehow come back to those topics. Always come back to those characters.
Well, I mean, it's a very cultural issue, and one of the things that I bring you on to talk about is these kind of Jewish cultural issues, because I think people are very concerned about wokeism in the broad, but I think it's very interesting to talk about how wokeism is affecting our community, right?
Right. So I just want to say that I think, first of all, that I don't see it creeping into the Jewish Orthodox community as much as you might perhaps in the way you're describing certain things. Like for the most part, and I mean, you can look at voting patterns among Orthodox Jews. I mean, overwhelmingly conservative, right? Like overwhelming.
2-1. The last time I saw the statistics, 2-1.
You're right. Right. So that's sort of fascinating to look at. I think where the real danger lies, and it's because first of all we have this concept in Judaism that we're all responsible for each other, right? Like we have Jews who are brothers and sisters. They're not religious, but they indeed are still our brothers and sisters, and we have to be responsible for each other and look after them. And I think what wokeism does is it sort of warps any potential they have in coming back into the fold of our community, and it keeps them away. So, like for example, like with the example that Rhodey brought up of David and Jonathan, right? Like in reading the Torah that way, that they were actually gay, right? And so therefore the Torah is sanctioning homosexual relations, even though it explicitly does not. This is a way for them to take Judaism and use it as a tool of justification for whatever political agendas they have. And it keeps them, this ideology keeps them from coming back to the fold of the community.
Right.
So that's where I really think the inherent danger lies.
Right. But in the piece that I brought to our attention, the thing about it that bothered me was not so much the pointing out of the situation, which is that Orthodox teenagers are becoming more woke. That was the point of this article we saw. And I'm going to read a little bit of it just so that you get an idea of what's going on. But more that bothered me was the prescription of the cure, right? Which is not that, the Jewish establishment, or specifically the Orthodox establishment, I use that term very broadly to include a lot of things that maybe other people wouldn't, but the Orthodox establishment more broadly should recognize the problem of wokeism and try to combat it. Instead, they're saying, oh, just, be more woke so the youth don't go away from religion. But part of it, in my opinion, part of the religion is being traditional in mindset. There's a traditional, and not like a specific traditional mindset, but there has to be a broad traditional minded mindset that has to be more than just the currents of the, of the day of the politics. And we're not.
Of course, we encourage a continuous link of a handing of tradition, right? I mean, it's in the prayer that we say Shema every day. The fathers are supposed to teach their sons, to put mezuzot on your doors and lay tefillin, right? Like this is all. It's part of a link of a tradition. It's very much part of Judaism, right?
Right. But instead of, and I'm going to just read this part so that you understand, so that the audience understands what's going on here. So basically this woman, Miriam Shaviv, and this is the article's called Wake Up, Orthodox Teenagers Are Now, quote unquote, woke. Shuls, namely synagogues and other institutions, have to find ways to accept a different generational outlook. First of all, what scares me is that this woman says that her teenage son accused her of racism. Now this is like a common theme. You'll see like the kids.
Not this woman. I think another woman.
Oh yeah, it was another woman. And so
she was saying that she was speaking with someone who.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, my apologies. That was I should have known this. But it really doesn't matter because this woman seems to endorse the woke stuff anyways. So it's a distinction without a difference. So first of all, you see like right off the bat, the woke teenage son is disrespecting his mom. Which I'm not saying like I'm the best son, like the son of the year, like far from it. But like I would never call my mom a racist. Like just I don't think I've ever called my mom a racist, even when I was a teenager.
I don't know.
I don't think so. If I did, I'll have to apologize, but I don't think I ever called my mom a racist. But it wasn't because, the mom said like Heil Hitler or something. It's because she wasn't sufficiently woke. And so you see one of the hallmarks of woke is that the kids know more than the parents. It's kind of like all those teenage movies where the parents want to destroy the forest and that the kids know better than to destroy nature, kind of like that. But it's a real thing. And so that's how the story starts. And then she's talking about, how like this change is going on, that they're watching a lot of television. So there's one paragraph I wanted to read. It starts with awareness. Shul authorities need to internalize that woke values are not something that other people believe in. It's something that many of their members' kids believe in, too, to differing extents, even though this might be going unnoticed. in the chaos of the corona situation. Second, we must not pit our community institutions against these teens. This is a real risk given that they are usually run by a much older generation, which often has little sympathy for Gen Z's values. Similarly, while many of our rabbis are astute about trends in the community and sensitive to congregant sensibilities, others come from backgrounds that will make it difficult for them to accept these points of view with understanding and compassion. So, isn't that the problem? Aren't we supposed to respect our elders? And if our elders are saying don't be woke, we should at least take, like, I'm not saying just because an elder said it, therefore you have to do it. Like, I'm not nearly that, like, authoritarian. But, you know, there is some value in if the elders who have been around for a little longer, if they tell you, hey, that's woke nonsense, don't believe in it. Shouldn't we be encouraging our kids to have a little humility and to, you know, kind of not believe in wokeism since it's causing them to be like anti-authority, not authoritarianism, but anti-authority in this way?
Well, you don't have to accept everything they say, but there, like you said, there is some value. They've been around, for a long time, so they have some, life experience, and they do have like a sense of, I guess, morals that they can, give you, and it can be beneficial to listen to some of them.
Right. So, which is why I would never make the argument that the synagogue, that the leadership is attuned to these things. I would actually make the argument that the leadership typically doesn't know what's going on, that they don't know what wokeism is, or they don't know how to go against it, or even worse, they agree with it, right? I've seen all three in my life, right? And I think that this is one of the problems I have with a lot of these rabbis, is these rabbis think that if they stick their head in the Talmud, they're somehow going to reach kids. But the Talmud is, I love the Talmud, right? But the Talmud is not the end all be all. You have to know what's going on. If you want to, especially with modern Orthodoxy, because the whole premise of modern Orthodoxy is that you have to interact with the world. You have to interact with modernity. But if you can't differentiate between modern values that are good and modern values that are bad, what business do you have interacting with the modern world? You can't do that.
Well, I think I would say the classic Orthodox take on this is that the world has always been in flux since the beginning of time. Certainly since the existence of the Jewish people, and we've always been very insular for various reasons, and that's again, that's happened with the flux of how politics have changed. So woke, communism, Nazism, whatever. Like the fact is, like, there's just a segment of religious Jewry that wants to remain insular, and they see, not without proof, that their model works in some sense, because traditional Judaism has existed for thousands of years, and they very much believe that their actions will continue to push its existence for the next 1,000 years to come.
Right, but I think that when people talk about the insularity of the Jewish community, what they don't realize is that oftentimes we were either insular or worldly, more based on the circumstances rather than our own philosophies.
That's true.
Right? So,
Right.
for example, throughout the exile up until like the 1800s, the reason we were insular is because that's how religious minorities were all around the world. Because typically, up until the emancipation in Western Europe, religious communities were given a lot of internal freedom by the local authorities, which is to say that, if you've ever looked into the Jewish history, you'll see that a lot of times Jewish courts had the right to do corporal punishment. They were responsible for the canon, for proper belief and practice, just as a lot of different other religious groups throughout the world were given their own autonomy, because the Catholics didn't really want to deal with internal Jewish issues, and nor did the Muslims. So they would have like the leader of the Jews who would respond to the higher authority in the land, and then he would be in charge of making sure that the Jews were in line, and he would have political power over the Jews in a way that wouldn't exist. And it was through emancipation in Europe that kind of changed, that everyone became a citizen and everyone was responsible to the government. But before that happened in the Roman Empire, Jews were much more worldly. They would go all over the planet and they would talk about the values of, the Holy One, blessed be He. There were a lot of people in the Roman Empire who believed in Judaism, but were not necessarily Jewish, right? And that was because they were allowed to be more worldly. I'm sorry, my apologies. They were allowed to be very worldly, and they were allowed to proselytize, quote unquote. But when that didn't happen in Europe, it wasn't because there was a lack of desire to do so. It was more just because that was the realities on the ground. So I think that's very important. But nowadays we live in this very open era where Jews can be worldly, but I don't think we've ever seen that, because the minute Jews became worldly, there were only two things. The first time Jews became worldly, then there was a Holocaust. And the second time Jews became worldly, it was at a time when values were very good. Rav Soloveitchik created Yeshiva University, which is essentially modern Orthodoxy. Around the time of World War II, Americans had good values back then, but I don't think YU's ready to grapple with the fact that maybe our values and, kind of woke values are two different things.
Yeah, I think of YU, by the way, and the fact that you said that, it's only going to help bolster those who are sort of very pro-insularity, that the YU is this sort of model of modern Orthodoxy. There were student petitions brought to YU to condemn, institutional racism within the Jewish community, right? And so the insularists are going to look at that and they're going to say, oh, well, you see, you open it up even an inch and you open the floodgates, I'm not of this opinion. I'm not of this opinion, by the way. I do think that a Jew should be able to contend both with tradition and the modern world, but we're lacking on strengthening our Judaism. We're lacking in strengthening that part of our Jewish identity, and only trying to contend with the modern world.
Well, I think we need to more just have a defined line of like where the problem is. We did the problem. It's good that we are in, I guess, in the modern world, but it's like we never drew a line of like, when does that stop?
Right. So you'll see a lot, like I've seen a lot of people from YU who they're in YU and maybe they learn in the Beit Midrash or maybe they don't, whatever. But then they'll go and say, oh, we need to have a gay straight alliance at Yeshiva University. What the hell do you need a gay straight alliance at Yeshiva University for? Gays know exactly the Orthodox position on Judaism. Any gay who goes to Yeshiva University is going there in spite of the fact that Orthodox Judaism says no gay sex, right? So
I mean, you're right, but the problem with the YU argument is the debate is, do you consider YU a university or do you consider it a religious institute?
Right, but I know that. But that's the thing. I know all that. But my thing is that if you want to go to a secular school, right? I think secular schools should also have rules and sexual taboos. But even more so if a school is founded to bolster a specific religious institution or a specific religious kind of mindset. And I would say the same thing if I were talking about a Catholic school. A Catholic school should be allowed to say, hey, we're not giving money to abortions, right? Because we're Catholic and that's what we do, right? So should YU be forced to have a gay straight alliance? I don't know. I'm not even talking about from the federal government. I'm talking about from its students. Like, shouldn't there be an expectation that at YU, if you go to YU, there's a certain level of, hey, we're going to adhere to traditional Jewish standards and we're not going to have a gay straight alliance because we don't look at the world that way in terms of if you're either straight or you're gay. We look at it as you're a person, there's sin, and there's virtue, and you have to choose virtue no matter what you want, right? And that's the way it should be in the Orthodox world, allegedly. But they're pushing this woke ideology into it, and I think part of it is that the leadership, both the rabbinic leadership and the lay leadership, they're woke themselves.
That's a big claim.
Oh, don't worry. I will attack them.
Listen,
I will attack them.
I don't see, I can understand how some of this wokeness is sort of infiltrating the Orthodox Jewish community, but to me, it's probably mostly surface. I don't think it's on a deep ideological level. Where I see it being a more insidious threat, again, is in the non-traditional Jewish communities.
I don't disagree with you.
Most of my flack from,
Right. So I don't disagree with that, but you'll see, I live in Israel, right, where there is no Reform and conservative Judaism. It's just Orthodox Judaism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Orthodox is not the best word, but
it's either you are religious or you're not religious.
It's your degree of how much you subscribe.
All of the synagogues are basically Orthodox,
except for unless they say they're Reform or conservative, they're Orthodox, right? Whereas in America, if you go to a Temple Emmanuel, it's Reform, right? Here it's everything is Orthodox. It's just to what degree are you observant of Orthodox Judaism, right? But for example, I live in a quote unquote Orthodox community, but how many women do I know who are not traditional in the sense that, they went to university, they got all these fancy degrees, and they're like in their late 20s, early 30s. They're not having kids anytime soon. They're just going to singles events, and they're, maybe learning Talmud or whatever, which I'm not against women learning Talmud. Don't take it that way. But in a traditional Orthodox society, these women would be expected to be having children, not getting 27 degrees. So they're not even necessarily against Orthodox values, but their behavior doesn't belie Orthodox tradition. Like if they really believed in Orthodox tradition, they wouldn't be spending their time like getting a PhD and who gives a shit, like getting all these stupid degrees and then not having kids. No, I don't even mean that like personally, like if a woman doesn't want to have kids, that's probably great for the rest of us because it means I don't have to deal with their children because they're probably unpleasant anyways. But I'm just saying like, just from if I was observing this from the outside, I see that in a lot of the more insular communities, the women are expected to get married. And you can complain about the insular communities all you want. I have my complaints with them as well. But they're woke in a different sense, that even if they're not necessarily subscribing to wokeism, implicitly they are.
Another thing I wanted to mention, that the article did mention how do you want to push these, if by not accepting them you're pushing them away. And I'm thinking to myself, it's kind of similar to when someone wants to convert. Judaism is the only religion in the world that tries to convince people not to join our religion. So it's like the same thing. It's like, do you want people who have that ideology like in your community? Now I know you don't want really Jews to like go away from Judaism, and I understand that, but there is a sense that if you do have people with that mindset in the community, it will corrupt eventually will maybe corrupt the ideology of the rest of the crowd. So do you actually want that those people, like, it's like they're afraid, oh, you're gonna push them away, but my question is that a bad thing?
Right.
So actually, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that as first of all, it's a very true sentiment. It's something that's been said to me multiple times. So like, oh, you're so against this and that. Well, you're not going to accept me and my wife and my family into your community, and you're pushing Jews away, right? And my immediate thought is like, well, why are you pushing Judaism away from yourself? Like your ideology is anti what our community has believed for such a long time, and you're criticizing me for not accepting those ideas. So I don't know. I'm conflicted because on one level, I want to keep these ideas away from us, and people they propagate ideas. At the same time, I do have this sort of Chabad spirit in which I want to bring people back into the fold. I want to be inclusive to everyone, right? So
in the spirit of being anti-Chabad, the anti-Chabad thing I'm going to say is you can't save everyone. Some people are just doomed to their own foolishness, and sometimes you need to let people hang themselves on their own rope. I'm like, obviously, like if I'm being a little more sincere, I would say I agree with you. I don't want anyone to leave the fold. I would love if we could get all the Orthodox Jews to agree, or even just all the Jews, not even Orthodox, just all the Jews to agree on a standard, right? But the problem is that that's not in concert with reality. The reality is you're going to lose some people. That's always how it's been.
Yeah, sure.
In the Middle Ages, there were Jews that converted to Christianity. There was Sabbateanism where we lost a lot of Jews to that. That's just the reality. So
no, it's true. It's true.
So on the one hand, yes, I think on an individual level, it's a good idea to go out and, for lack of a better word, proselytize to other Jews and tell them like Judaism is great. But when you're talking about the actual like what we believe, you can't sugarcoat it. You can't say like, you have to say these are our values and this is what we're standing by, and we'll let you in our synagogues to join us for prayer. But I'm going to be damned if I'm going to let you anywhere near my kids if you're telling my kids that they can be non-binary. Like this lady in the article was saying that there are kids in Orthodox schools that identify as non-binary. Like, what the hell is non-binary? Like, I know what it is, but imagine if some rabbi who graduated YU in the 70s, right, heard what non-binary is. Like you didn't like. I'm not even a big fan of YU, but I don't think any rabbi graduates from REITs to then deal with some kid who's non-binary. Like it's so nuts. Like like to navigate that minefield is just, like,
I'd be really curious to know what Rav Soloveitchik would be thinking if he was alive today.
Yeah, that's. But that's the thing. Like they're like everyone has their rabbi who in history they really respect. Like for me, I think it's Maimonides and Rabbi Emden. I think Rabbi Emden, to a lesser degree, Moshe Chagiz. But you've got those rabbis who you always like kind of you want to transplant them into your time and kind of see what they would think. But I think we need to kind of be our own Maimonides. We need to say, like, we need to find the guy who's going to come against this. Now, easily, the rabbi that easily comes to mind who talks against this is Rabbi Stephen Przansky. You've ever heard of him?
Actually, I have not.
So he was the head of B'nai Shurin, and even when he was the head of B'nai Shurin, even when he was the rabbi of B'nai Shurin, he would say things that would piss off all the right people, and it was all the right people because he was saying base things before I even knew what the word based meant. And now that he moved to Israel and he's not, in charge of any congregation anymore, now he just spits out facts left and right. And then there's also Rabbi Bar Chaim, who I really respect as well. I think I also respect him from a religious perspective that he kind of wants to reframe Judaism, away from the quote unquote Orthodox way. And what I mean by that is that Orthodoxy as it was defined in response to Reform Judaism. Right, which you have to acknowledge that Orthodox Judaism. There was really two points in history that created Orthodox Judaism as we know it. It was the first was a compilation of the Shulchan Aruch by Rabbi Caro, and then there was the response to the Reform movement where they changed a lot of accepted attitudes towards halakha, such as minhag shtut. So they changed.
One might even assert that the label of Orthodox is already an insert of woke ideology in the Jewish community.
Right, because it's the concept of ideology in Judaism is very amorphous, right? Like we didn't really have that. It would be more accurate to say it's orthoprax Judaism that you practice the way, because up until very recently there was more of an emphasis on practice rather than belief. Strict, not that there was never things that would make you a heretic if you believe them, but rather that Judaism is also very, very focused on works, not just on not like the whole Christian things, like you're saved by faith alone, not by works. But Judaism, you're saved by works more than you are by faith. Yeah. But wow, yeah. This is a problem. I think our lay leadership failed, and I'm just gonna say this outright because I think a lot of the lay leadership and I think we all fell for it. Like the problem with fighting wokeism, and this James Lindsay talks about it a lot, is to fight wokeism effectively, you need to be very precise with words. And I think up until now, rabbis didn't think that understanding the ins and outs of non-binary was really part of their job.
And the problem is being precise with words is they keep changing the definition.
Right, but that's why James Lindsay says it's very important if you're fighting wokeism, you have to know exactly what you're talking about. Because wokeism is about, unlike other problems, wokeism, one of the problems with wokeism is that it's a moving target. Right. So if you're fighting wokeism, you need to know exactly what you're doing. You need to exactly know what they're talking about. You have to have like up to date understandings of their way of looking at things. So you can say this word means this nowadays. This is what the implication of this is, and this is why it disagrees with Orthodoxy. And a lot of rabbis, they focus time on the Talmud and on the Tanya and on the Tanakh. And those things are all important, don't get me wrong. But what I think differentiates our rabbis today from the rabbis of yesteryear from the Talmud, which is why I just when I read about the rabbis from the Talmud, I'm just always amazed by them, is because the greatest rabbis of the Talmud, they also knew about Avodah Zarah. They knew about Avodah Zarah and they knew how to serve it so that they could fight against it. But rabbis nowadays, they don't know how to fight things. Like they don't like. And that's a problem because if you see an anti-Jewish movement, you need to understand it so that you could tell the kids not to do it.
Yeah, I hear you, and I don't disagree. I mean, I think there's a lack of leadership, and I mean, what I was thinking about as you were saying it is in the whole sphere of Israel activism and advocacy is more than ever present. These ideas of wokeness, because the whole praxis there is that you're trying to build alliances, right? You're trying to build alliances with other communities, and so you have to take on some of their ideology in order to build those alliances.
But that's actually like the Bible told us, like when they're talking about kings, they say that you shouldn't make too many alliances. Like kind of like the founding fathers, the Hebrew kings were not supposed to make such alliances. They're supposed to rely on faith in God alone. So,
right.
So like the whole concept of Hasbara is a very anti-Tanakh movement, because the reality is that you shouldn't have to make alliance. Like, it shouldn't matter what stupid American teenagers think on college campuses,
Right.
for Israel.
Right.
You rely on faith in the Lord, in God, and you do what you need to do. I would love to have a conversation where, we get together a bunch of Jews who are all politically conservative but come from different, like, sects, quote unquote, of Judaism. Like, there's Orthodox, and then there's a guy like me who doesn't really fit neatly anywhere. And then, we bring in a conservative Jew and a Reformed Jew, but that's going to take a long time. But, hopefully you'll be on there as well, because you're probably more traditionally Orthodox than I am, I guess, for lack of a term.
If you'd have me on, I'm not going to say no ever. You know that. So.
Yeah, I know. But we're very glad you came today to join us on the show. So, Rhodey, do you want to close us out?
Yeah. So, Josh, would you like to let the audience know where they can find you?
Yeah. Once again, I'm coming to represent Low Effort Zionist Memes. Mostly active on Instagram at Low Effort Zionist Memes .3, and we'll be expanding slowly. Surely, we're expanding more. But definitely come interact with us there. And thank you guys for bringing me on. I really, really enjoyed my time.
Yeah, and thank you all for joining us this week. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to be updated on our latest uploads. In addition, we are on Apple, Spotify, Google, Audible, Stitcher, and all the other beloved podcast platforms. I don't know what you use, but I mean, they're all out there.
If it exists, chances are we're on it.
Yeah. We look forward to you all joining us next week. So, see ya.
Bye.